Welcome to episode. Today we're going to be short, but first are we going to be doing devotions? No devotions. So I guess yes, Bible reading.
Yes, Bible reading.
We're doing Bible reading. Then we're going to be doing Synopsis.
Sure.
With Kimberly, and then we are going to be reading the Return of the King. And if you actually look, Dad said this a while back, but J.R.R. Tolkien. Dad said that a while back. I just wanted to point it out again. So, adios.
Hello! How are we doing today? This is our time for our Bible reading. We are on 2 Samuel, and we are going to finish 2 Samuel today. And it is a little bit of a long reading. This is the English Standard Version. Let me go ahead and begin. These are the names of the mighty men whom David had. Josheb Bashabeth, a Takamanite. He was the chief of the three. He wielded his spear against 800 whom he killed at one time. And next to him among the three mighty men was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, son of Ahohi. He was with David when they defied the Philistines who were gathered there for battle, and the men of Israel withdrew. He rose and struck down the Philistines until his hand was weary, and his hand clung to the sword. And the Lord brought about a great victory that day, and the men returned after him only to strip the slain. And next to him was Shammah, the son of Agi, the Hararite. The Philistines gathered together at Lehi, where there was a plot of ground full of lentils, and the men fled from the Philistines. But he took his stand in the midst of the plot and defended it, and struck down the Philistines, and the Lord worked a great victory. And 3 of the 30 chief men went down and came about harvest time to David at the cave of Adullam, when a band of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. David was then in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then at Bethlehem. And David said longingly, "Oh, that someone would give me water to drink from the well at Bethlehem that is by the gate." Then the 3 mighty men broke through the camp of the Philistines and drew water out of the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and carried and brought it to David. But he would not drink of it. He poured it out to the Lord and said, "Far be it from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Shall I drink the blood of the men who went at the risk of their lives?" Therefore he would not drink it. These things the 3 mighty men did. Now Abishai, the brother of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was chief of the 30, and he wielded his spear against 300 men and killed them, and won a name beside the 3. He was the most renowned of the 30, and became their commander, but he did not attain to the 3. And Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was a valiant man of Kabzeel, a doer of great deeds. He struck down 2 Ariels of Moab. He also went down and struck down a lion in a pit on a day when snow had fallen. And he struck down an Egyptian, a handsome man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, but Benaiah went down to him with a staff and snatched the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. These things did Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and won a name beside the 3 mighty men. He was renowned among the 30, but he did not attain to the 3. And David set him over his bodyguard. Asahel, the brother of Joab, was one of the 30. Elhanan, the son of Dodo of Bethlehem, Shammah of Harod, Elika of Harod, Helez the Paltite, Ira the son of Ikah of Tekoa, Abiezar of Anathoth, Mebunai the Hushathite, Zalman the Ahohite, Meharai of Netophah, Helab the son of Banah of Netophah, Ittai the son of Ribai of Gibeah of the people of Benjamin, Benaiah of Pirathon, Hiddai of the brooks of Gash, Abba Alban of the Arbathite, Asmaveth of Bahurim, Eliabah the Shalbanite, the sons of Jonathan, Shema the Hararite, Ahiam the son of Sharar the Hararite, Eliphalet the son of Ahasbai of Mecca, Eliam the son of Ahithophel the Gilonite, Hezro of Carmel, Parai the Arbite, Eagle the son of Nathan of Zobah, Bani the Gadite, Zelek the Ammonite, Naharai of Beroth, the armor-bearer of Joab, the sons of Zeruiah, Ira the Ithrite, Gareb the Ithrite, Uriah the Hittite, 37 in all. So, that's a lot of names, but think of it this way. If there were a bunch of heroes in Israel that weren't otherwise named, this was their chance. They got to be in the newspaper, and so to speak, and so they were publicly honored in this way. So you can think of it that way. So we're going to continue on to chapter 24 so that we can just go ahead and finish 2 Samuel. And then we'll go on to the next book, which will be in the New Testament tomorrow. Again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, of course this is chapter 24, "Go, number Israel and Judah." So the king said to Joab, the commander of the army who was with him, "Go through all the tribes of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, and number the people, that I may know the number of the people." But Joab said to the king, "May the Lord your God add to the people 100 times as many as they are, while the eyes of my lord the king still see it. But why does my lord the king delight in this thing?" But the king's word prevailed against Joab and the commanders of the army. So Joab and the commanders of the army went out from the presence of the king to number the people of Israel. They crossed the Jordan and began from Aroer, and from the city that is in the middle of the valley, toward Gad and on to Jazer. Then they came to Gilead and to Kadesh in the land of the Hittites, and they came to Dan, and from Dan they went around to Sidon, and came to the fortress of Tyre, and to the cities of the Hivites and Canaanites. And they went out to the Negeb and of Judah at Beersheba. So when they had gone through all the land, they came to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. And Joab gave the sum of the numbering of the people to the king. In Israel there were 800,000 valiant men who drew the sword, and the men of Judah were 500,000. But David's heart struck him after he had numbered the people, and David said to the Lord, "I have sinned greatly in what I have done, but now, O Lord, please take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have done very foolishly." And when David arose in the morning, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Gad, David's seer, saying, "Go and say to David, thus says the Lord, 3 things I offer you, choose one of them, that I may do it to you." So Gad came to David and told him and said to him, "Shall 3 years of famine come to you in your land? Or will you flee 3 months before your foes while they pursue you? Or shall there be 3 days' pestilence in your land? Now consider and decide what answer I shall return to him who sent me." Imagine God gave him the ability to choose which consequences he got for his sin. Then David said to Gad, "I am in great distress. Let us fall into the hand of the Lord, for his mercy is great, but let me not fall into the hand of men." So the Lord sent a pestilence on Israel from the morning until the appointed time, and there died of the people from Dan to Beersheba 70,000 men. And when the angel stretched out his hand toward Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord relented from the calamity, and said to the angel who was working destruction among the people, "It is enough, now stay your hand." And the angel of the Lord was by the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. Then David spoke to the Lord when he saw the angel who was striking the people, and said, "Behold, I have sinned, and I have done wickedly. But these sheep, what have they done? Please let your hand be against me and against my father's house." And Gad came that day to David, and said to him, "Go up, raise an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite." So David went up at Gad's word at the Lord's command, or as the Lord commanded. And when Araunah looked down, he saw the king and his servants coming on toward him. And Araunah went out and paid homage to the king with his face to the ground. And Araunah said, "Why has my lord the king come to his servant?" David said, "To buy the threshing floor from you, in order to build an altar to the Lord, that the plague may be averted from the people." Then Araunah said to David, "Let my lord the king take and offer up what seems good to him. Here are the oxen for the burnt offering, and the threshing sledges, and the yokes of the oxen for the wood. All this, O king," Araunah gives to the king. And Araunah said to the king, "May the Lord your God accept you." But the king said to Araunah, "No, but I will buy it from you for a price. I will not offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God that cost me nothing." So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver. And David built there an altar to the Lord, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. So the Lord responded to the plea for the land, and the plague was averted from Israel. So that obviously is not the end of the story of David. However, we've read 1st and 2nd Samuel together, so starting tomorrow we will begin a New Testament book, which I think we already know what it is. I wish people would stop talking while I'm talking, but that goes without saying. And time for the synopsis. So, in the last chapter, actually, in the first part of this chapter, they were riding on their horses, and they were, let's see, what were they doing? So Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli had left with the Dunedain, and they went into the mountain and were talking to the army of the dead, right?
No, they went through the mountain so that they can get to Gondor before the force of
Okay,
Mordor attacks.
Kim, you're done. All right, so
What? I'm not done.
they were negotiating with the army of the dead, were they not?
Not exactly. The army of the dead owed them a debt.
Okay, maybe we should go back and read chapter 2.
No.
No?
The army of the dead owed them a debt, and they're repaying the debt, and they're fighting for Gondor now.
Okay, but that was in chapter 2, which I think maybe we should go back and watch that video. And we actually didn't get very far into chapter 3. I think Kimmy wants to tell us, but
sorry, there's not much space back here. What happened after that was, it was Merry or Pippin, I can't remember which one, but they're going with the king.
Mary.
It was Merry. They're going with the king, and they're riding on the horses, and they made it to
Edoras.
Yeah, they made it to Edoras, where
Elowen.
sorry, I'm horrible with names. She told them that Aragorn.
Eowyn, sorry.
Eowyn. She told them that Aragorn and everybody else already left, like the day before.
And that's about as far as we got.
Yeah.
Because we had to stop early. But the good news is that we only have 8 pages left of this chapter. So, at this time, let's go ahead and get this chapter finished. Slowly they passed through the short heath and upland grass, speaking no more until they came to the king's pavilion. There Merry found that everything was made ready, and that he himself was not forgotten. A little tent had been pitched for him beside the king's lodging, and there he sat alone, while men passed to and fro, going in to the king and taking counsel with him. Night came on, and the half-seen heads of the mountain westward were crowned with stars, but the east was dark and blank. The marching stones faded slowly from sight, but still beyond them, blacker than the gloom, brooded the vast crouching shadow of the Dwimmerberg. The paths of the dead, he muttered to himself. The paths of the dead? What does all this mean? They have all left me now. They have all gone to some doom. Gandalf and Pippin to war in the east, and Sam and Frodo to Mordor, and Strider and Legolas and Gimli to the paths of the dead. But my turn will come soon enough, I suppose. I wonder what they are all talking about, and what the king means to do, for I must go where he goes now. In the midst of these gloomy thoughts, he suddenly remembered that he was very hungry, and he got up to go and to see if anyone else in this strange camp felt the same. But at the very moment a trumpet sounded, and a man came summoning him, the king's esquire, to wait at the king's board. In the inner parts of the pavilion was a small space curtained off with broidered hangings and strewn with skins, and there was a small table sat there. At a small table sat Theoden, with Eomer and Eowyn and Dunhir, lord of Harrowdale. Merry stood beside the king's stool and waited on him till presently the old man, coming out of deep thought, turned to him and smiled. "Come, Master Meriadoc," he said, "you shall not stand. You shall sit beside me as long as I remain in my own lands, and lighten my heart with tales." Room was made for the hobbit at the king's left hand, but no one called for any tale. There was indeed little speech, and they ate and drank for the most part in silence, until at last, plucking up courage, Merry asked the question that was tormenting him. "Twice now, my lord, I have heard of the paths of the dead," he said. "What are they? And where is Strider, the Lord Aragorn? Where is he gone?" The king sighed, but no one answered, until at last Eomer spoke. "We do not know, and our hearts are heavy," he said. "But as for the paths of the dead, you have yourself walked on their very steps. Nay, I speak no words of ill omen. The road that we have climbed in the approach to the door, yonder is the Dimholt. But what lies beyond, no man knows." "No man knows," said Theoden, "yet ancient legend, now seldom spoken, has somewhat to report. If these old tales speak true that have come down from father to son in the house of Eorl, then the door under Dwimmerberg leads to a secret way that goes beneath the mountain to some forgotten end. But none have ever ventured in to search its secrets, since Baldur, son of Brego, passed the door and was never seen among men again. A rash vow he spoke, and he drained the horn at the feast which Brego made to hallow new-built Meduseld, and he came never to the high seat of which he was the heir. Folk say that dead men out of the dark years guard the way, and will suffer no living man to come to their hidden halls. But at whiles they may themselves be seen passing out of the door like shadows, and down the stony road. Then the people of Harrowdale shut fast their doors and shroud their windows and are afraid. But the dead come seldom forth, and only at times of great unquiet and coming death. Yet it is said in Harrowdale, said Erwin in a low voice, that in the moonless nights, but little while ago, a great host in strange array passed by. Whence they came none knew, but they went up the stony road and vanished into the hill as if they went to keep a tryst. Then why has Aragorn gone that way? Said Merry. Why, don't you know anything that would explain it? Unless he has spoken words to you, as his friend, that we have not heard, said Eomer. None now in the land of the living can tell his purpose. Greatly changed he seemed to me, since I saw him first in the king's house, said Eowyn, grimming, older. Fey I thought him, and like one whom the dead calls. Maybe he was called, said Theoden, and my heart tells me that I shall not see him again. Yet he is a kingly man of high destiny, and take comfort in this, daughter, since comfort you seem to need in your grief for this guest. It is said that when the Erlingas came out of the north and passed at length up the Snowbourn, seeking strong places and refuge in time of need, Brego and his son Baldur climbed the stair of the hold and so came before the door. On the threshold sat an old man, aged beyond guess of years. Tall and kingly he had been, but now he was withered as an old stone. Indeed, for stone they took him, for he moved not, and he said no word until they sought to pass him by and enter. And then a voice came out of him, as if were out of the ground, and to their amaze it spoke in the western tongue. The way is shut. Then they halted and looked at him, and saw that he lived still, but he did not look at them. The way is shut, his voice said again. It was made by those who are dead, and the dead keep it. Until the time comes, the way is shut. And when will that time be? Said Baldur, but no answer did he ever get. For the old man died in that hour, and fell upon his face, and no other tidings of the ancient dwellers in the mountain have our folk ever learned. Yet maybe at last the time foretold has come, and Aragorn may pass. But how shall a man discover whether that time be come or no, save by daring the door, said Eomer, and that way I would not go, though all the hosts of Mordor stood before me, and I were alone and had no other refuge. Alas, that a fey mood should fall on a man so great-hearted in this hour of need. Are there not evil things enough abroad without seeking them under the earth? War is at hand. He paused, for at that moment there was a noise outside, a man's voice crying the name of Theoden and the challenge of the guard. Presently the captain of the guard thrust aside the curtain. A man is here, lord, he said, an errand rider of Gondor. He wishes to come before you at once. Let him come, said Theoden. A tall man entered, and Merry choked back a cry. For a moment it seemed to him that Boromir was alive again and had returned. Then he saw that it was not so. The man was a stranger, though as like to Boromir as if he were one of his kin, tall and grey-eyed and proud. He was clad as a rider with a cloak of dark green over a coat of fine mail. On the front of his helm was wrought a small silver star. In his hand he bore a single arrow, black-feathered and barbed with steel, but the point was painted red. He sank on one knee and presented the arrow to Theoden. Hail, Lord of the Rohirrim, friend of Gondor, he said. Here gone I am, errand rider of Denethor, who bring you this token of war. Gondor is in great need. Often the Rohirrim have aided us, but now the Lord Denethor asks for all your strength and all your speed, lest Gondor fall at last. The red arrow, said Theoden, holding it as one who receives a summons long expected and yet dreadful when it comes. His hand trembled. The red arrow has not been seen in the mark in all my years. Has it indeed come to that? And what does the Lord Denethor reckon that all my strength and all my speed may be? That is best known to yourself, Lord, said Irgon. But ere long it may well come to pass that Minas Tirith is surrounded, and unless you have the strength to break a siege of many powers, the Lord Denethor bids me say that he judges that the strong arms of the Rohirrim would be better within his walls than without. But he knows that we are a people who fight rather upon horseback and in the open, and that we are also a scattered people, and time is needed for the gathering of our riders. Is it not true, Hirgon, that the Lord of Minas Tirith knows more than he sets in his message? For we are already at war, as you may have seen, and you do not find us all unprepared. Gandalf the Grey has been among us, and even now we are mustering for battle in the east. What the Lord Denethor may know or guess of all these things I cannot say, answered Irgon. But indeed our case is desperate. My lord does not issue any command to you. He begs you only to remember old friendship and oaths long spoken, and for your own good to do all that you may. It is reported to us that many kings have ridden in from the east to the service of Mordor, from the north to the field of Dagorlad. There is skirmish and rumor of war. In the south the Haradrim are moving, and fear has fallen on all our coastlands, so that little help will come to us thence. Make haste, for it is before the walls of Minas Tirith that the doom of our time will be decided, and if the tide be not stemmed there, then it will flow over all the fair fields of Rohan, and even in this hold among the hills there shall be no refuge. Dark tidings, said Theoden, yet not all unguessed. But say to Denethor that even if Rohan itself felt no peril, still we would come to his aid. But we have suffered much loss in our battles with Saruman the traitor, and we must still think of our frontier to the north and east, as his own tidings make clear. So great a power as the Dark Lord seems now to wield might well contain us in battle before the city, and yet strike with great force across the river away beyond the gate of kings. But we will speak no longer counsels of prudence. We will come. The weapon take was set for the morrow. When all is ordered, we will set out. 10,000 spears I might have sent riding over the plain to the dismay of your foes. It will be less now, I fear, for I will not leave my strongholds all unguarded. Yet 6,000 at the least shall ride behind me. For say to Denethor that in this hour the King of the Mark himself will come down to the land of Gondor, though maybe he will not ride back. But it is a long road, and man and beast must reach the end with strength to fight. A week it may be from tomorrow's morn ere you hear the cry of the sons of Eorl coming from the north. A week, said Hirgon. If it must be so, it must. But you are like to find only ruined walls in 7 days from now, unless other help unlooked for comes. Still, you may at the least disturb the orcs and swarthy men from their feasting in the White Tower. At the least we will do that, said Theoden. But I myself am new come from battle and long journey, and I will now go to rest. Tarry here this night. Then you shall look on the Muster of Rohan, and ride away the gladder for the sight, and the swifter for the rest. In the morning counsels are best, and night changes many thoughts. With that the king stood up, and they all rose. Go now each to your rest, he said, and sleep well. And you, Master Meriadoc, I need no more tonight, but be ready to my call as soon as the sun is risen. I will be ready, said Merry, even if you bid me ride with you on the paths of the dead. Speak no words of omen. Speak not words of omen, said the king, for there may be more roads than one that could bear that name. But I did not say that I would bid you ride with me on any road. Good night. I won't be left behind to be called for on return, said Merry. I won't be left, I won't. And repeating this over and over again to himself, he fell asleep at last in his tent. He was wakened by a man shaking him. Wake up, Master Holbeitla, he cried, and at length Merry came out of a deep dreams and sat up with a start. It still seemed very dark, he thought. What is the matter? He asked. The king calls for you. But the sun has not yet risen, said Merry. No, and will not rise today, Master Holbeitla. No, and nor ever again, one would think, under this cloud. But time does not stand still, though the sun be lost. Make haste! Flinging on some clothes, Merry looked outside. The world was darkling. The very air seemed brown, and all things about were black and grey and shadowless, and there was a great stillness. No shape of cloud could be seen unless it were far away westward, where the furthest groping fingers of the great gloom still crawled onward, and a little light leaked through them. Overhead there hung a heavy roof, sombre and featureless, and light seemed rather to be failing than growing. Merry saw many folk standing, looking up and muttering. All their faces were grey and sad, and some were afraid. With a sinking heart he made his way to the king. Hirgon, the rider of Gondor, was there before him, and beside him stood now another man like him, and dressed alike, but shorter and broader. As Merry entered, he was speaking to the king. It comes from Mordor, lord, he said. It began last night at sunset. From the hills in the eastfold of your realm I saw it rise and creep across the sky, and all night as I rode it came behind, eating up the stars. Now the great cloud hangs over all the land between here and the mountains of shadow, and it is deepening. War has already begun. For a while the king sat silent. At last he spoke. So we come to it in the end, he said, the great battle of our time, in which many things shall pass away, but at least there is no longer need for hiding. We will ride that straight way and the open road, and with all our speed. The muster shall begin at once, and wait for none that tarry. Have you good store in Minas Tirith? For if we must ride now in all haste, then we must ride light, with but meal and water enough to last us into battle. We have very great store, long prepared, answered Irgon. Ride now, as light and as swift as you may. Then call the heralds, Eomer, said Theoden. Let the riders be marshalled. Eomer went out, and presently the trumpets rang in the hold, and were answered by many others from below, but their voices no longer sounded clear and brave as they had seemed to Merry the night before. Dull they seemed, and harsh in the heavy air, braying ominously. The king turned to Merry. I am going to war, Master Meriadoc, he said. In a little while I shall take the road. I release you from my service, but not from my friendship. You shall abide here, and if you will, you shall serve the Lady Eowyn, who will govern the folk in my stead. But, my lord, Merry stammered, I offered you my sword. I do not want to be parted from you like this, Theoden king, and as all my friends have gone to the battle, I should be ashamed to stay behind. But we ride on horses tall and swift, said Theoden, and great though your heart may be, you cannot ride on such beasts. Then tie me on to the back of one, or let me hang on a stirrup or something, said Merry. It is a long way to run, but run I shall if I cannot ride, even if I wear my feet off and arrive weeks too late. Theoden smiled. Rather than that, I would bear you with me on Shadowmane, he said, but at the least you shall ride with me to Edoras, and look on Meduseld, for that way I shall go. So far Staiba can bear you. The great race will not begin till we reach the plains. Then Eowyn rose up. Come now, Meriadoc, she said. I will show you the gear that I have prepared for you. They went out together. "This request only did Aragorn make to me," said Eowyn, as they passed among the tents, "that you should be armed for battle. I have granted it as I could, for my heart tells me that you will need such gear ere the end." Now she led Merry to a booth among the lodges of the king's guard, and there an armorer brought out to her a small helm and a round shield and other gear. How did I get great from that? "No mail have we to fit you," said Eowyn, "nor any time for the forging of such a hauberk. But here is also a stout jerkin of leather, a belt and a knife, a sword you have." Merry bowed, and the lady showed him the shield, which was like the shield that had been given to Gimli, and it bore on it the device of a white horse. "Take all these things," she said, "and bear them to good fortune. Farewell now, Master Meriadoc, yet maybe we shall meet again, you and I." So it was that amid a gathering gloom the King of the Mark made ready to lead all his riders on the eastward road. Hearts were heavy and many quailed in the shadow, but they were a stern people, loyal to their lord, and little weeping or murmuring was heard, even in the camp of the hold where the exiles from Edoras were housed, women and children and old men. Doom hung over them, but they faced it silently. 2 swift hours passed, and now the king sat upon his white horse, glimmering in the half-light. Proud and tall he seemed, though the hair that flowed beneath his high helm was like snow, and many marvelled at him and took heart to see him unbent and unafraid. There on the white flats beside the noisy river were marshalled in many companies well nigh 55 hundreds of riders fully armed, and many hundreds of other men with spare horses lightly burdened. A single trumpet sounded. The king raised his hand, and then silently the host of the Mark began to move. Foremost went 12 of the king's household men, riders of renown. Then the king followed with Eomer on his right. He had said farewell to Eowyn above in the hold, and the memory was grievous. But now he turned his mind to the road that lay ahead. Behind him Merry rode on Steba with the errand riders of Gondor, and behind them again 12 more of the king's household. They passed down the long ranks of waiting men with stern and unmoved faces, but when they had come almost to the end of the line, one looked up, glancing keenly at the hobbit. A young man, Merry thought, as he returned the glance, less in height and girth than most. He caught the glint of clear grey eyes, and then he shivered, for it came suddenly to him that it was the face of one without hope, who goes in search of death. On down the grey road they went beside the Snowbourn, rushing on its stones, through the hamlets of Underharrow and Upbourne, where many sad faces of women looked out from dark doors, and so without horn or harp or music of men's voices, the great ride into the east began, with which the songs of Rohan were busy for many long lives of men thereafter. From dark Dunharrow in the dim morning, with thane and captain rose Thingol's son. To Edoras he came, the ancient halls of the Mark Wardens mist enshrouded. Golden timbers were in gloom mantled. Farewell he bade to his free people. Hearth and high seat, and the hallowed places, where long he had feasted ere the light faded. Forth rode the king far behind him, fate before him, fealty kept he, oaths he had taken, all fulfilled them. Forth rode Theoden 5 nights and days, east and onward rode on the Erlingos, through Fold and Fenmarch and the Fiernan wood, 6,000 spears to Sunlending, Munburg the mighty under Mindoluin, Sea King's city in the south kingdom, foe beleaguered, fire encircled, doom drove them on, darkness took them. Horse and horseman, hoofbeats afar, sank into silence. so the songs tell us. It was indeed in deepening gloom that the king came to Edoras, although it was then but noon by the hour. There he halted only a short while, and strengthened his host by some 60 of riders that came late to his weapon take. Now, having eaten, he made ready to set out again, and he wished his esquire a kindly farewell, but Mary begged for the last time not to be parted from him. "This is no journey for such steeds as Steba, as I have told you," said Theoden, "and in such a battle as we think to make on the fields of Gondor, what would you do, Master Meriadoc, sword thane though you may be, and greater of heart than of stature?" "As for that, who could tell?" answered Mary. "But why, Lord, did you receive me as sword thane, if not to stay by your side? And I would not have it said of me in song only that I was always left behind." "I received you for safekeeping, for your safekeeping," answered Theoden, "and also to do as I might bid. None of my riders can bear you as burden. If the battle were before my gates, maybe your deeds would be remembered by the minstrels. But it is 100 leagues and 2 to Mundburg, where Denethor is lord. I will say no more." Mary bowed and went away unhappily, and stared at the lines of horsemen. Already the companies were preparing to start. Men were tightening girths, looking to saddles, caressing their horses. Some gazed uneasily at the lowering sky. Unnoticed, a rider came up and spoke softly in the hobbit's ear. "Where will wants not, a way opens, so we say," he whispered, "and so I have found myself." Mary looked up and saw that it was the young rider whom he had noticed in the morning. "You wish to go whither the Lord of the Mark goes? I see it in your face." "I do," said Mary. "Then you shall go with me," said the rider. "I will bear you before me under my cloak until we are far afield, and this darkness is yet darker. Such goodwill should not be denied. Say no more to any man, but come." "Thank you indeed," said Mary. "Thank you, sir, though I do not know your name." "Do you not?" said the rider softly. "Then call me Durnhelm." Thus it came to pass that when the king set out, before Durnhelm sat Meriadoc the hobbit, and the great grey steed Windfolda made little of the burden, for Durnhelm was less in weight than many men, though lithe and well knit in frame. On into shadow they rode, in the willow thickets, where Snowbourn flowed into Entwash. 12 leagues east of Edoras they camped that night, and then on again through the fold, and through the fen march, where to their right great oak woods climbed on the skirts of the hills, under the shades of dark Halathirion, by the borders of Gondor. But away to their left the mist lay on the marshes fed by the mouths of Entwash, and as they rode, rumor came of war in the north. Lone men riding wild brought word of foes assailing their east borders, of orc hosts marching in the wold of Rohan. "Ride on," cried Eomer. "Too late now to turn aside. The fens of Entwash must guard our flank. Haste now we need, ride on." And so King Theoden departed from his own realm, and mile by mile the long road wound away, and the beacon hills marched past. Calenhad, Min Rimmon, Erelas, Nardol, but their fires were quenched. All the lands were grey and still, and ever the shadow deepened before them, and hope waned in every heart. That is the end of chapter 3. Tomorrow we begin, or possibly complete, chapter 4, the siege of Gondor, and the first word is Pippin. So I'm just looking really quickly, and that one is 25-ish pages. No, yes, 25-ish pages, so that might be a two-nighter. Alrighty, so I hope that you're enjoying the story. I think JJ, even though we had a short night, got sleepy. And I will see you again tomorrow, and God bless you. Have a good night.